and Helen Lowrey from the Migrant Rights Centre in Ireland. Just back to Michael's previous VT and the Irish taxi driver who didn't realise he was being recorded. Everyone knows it, they're racist. That's what he said.
Well, I'd categorically deny that the green light is a sign of racism. You've also heard drivers there, and the actual retailer who supplies this has supplied them to all nationalities. Now, he doesn't discriminate about who he supplies the green lights to.
He said it means get into my car, I'm an Irish driver, don't get into the black guy's car.
It is an extra visual display for daytime work. Now, the reason it's on at night time is because it's actually connected to your roof sign. So that operates at night.
But Dave, isn't the roof sign that's there, the big yellow sign across the top of the taxi, when you're available for hire, it's switched on, and when you're not available, when there's someone in the car, it's switched off. So isn't that the purpose of that sign? Why do we need an extra light?
Well, I'm sure yourself has experienced during the daytime, if you put out your hand for a taxi and then you realise that there is actually somebody in it. The roof sign that we have at the moment is not, it's not visible during the day. And the guys that have these lights on use this as an extra visible aspect to drum up work for themselves.
Someone said in the VT they have them in Portugal and Spain, but we're not living in Portugal and Spain, we're living in Ireland.
Yeah, I know where we're living, but the fact is that these the green lights are being used as an extra visual display for taxi drivers to drum up work.
Are there any black drivers or Eastern Europeans or any other foreign nationalities using these green lights?
There are indeed. On my own rank, I work on the Foster Place rank. The two guys that I actually know on the rank that use the green lights are from Romania. So the evidence that people can say, oh, it's a racist symbol, but the evidence that we hear from the retailer that supplies the lights themselves and the evidence from the rank I work on, it is not a racist symbol.
Do you buy all this, Helen?
Well, I think the thing about the green lights is that, and I have to say, I haven't seen one. Maybe I'm walking around Dublin with my eyes closed, but I've yet to see a taxi with a green light. They're not widespread, yeah. But I think really, and may just say up front, if this is about increased availability of taxis, if this is about us as public being able to see that a taxi is more available, then that, nobody disputes that. I don't think anybody wants to be taking money out of the pockets of taxi drivers. However, that's exactly what I was going to say, Claire. Why isn't it widespread? Why is it that only some workers have it and some taxis have it? And the other bit that I would say is what I'm hearing anecdotally from friends and from people, including taxi drivers, is that this is actually about differentiating between taxi drivers on the basis of nationality. And also this incident cannot be considered in isolation of the fact that we know there have been problems in the industry. We know there's racism in Irish society, but we know there's been problems in the industry. For example, in preceding this, we've had I am Irish stickers. I've seen them myself.
But we haven't actually definitively established, Helen, that these green lights are, as you were saying, that they're an indication of the nationality. I'm Irish, use my cab. Or what Dave is saying, that they're actually to help maybe perhaps visually impaired people or for anyone to see them clearly. We haven't actually definitively established that. It's all hearsay and anecdotal evidence.
It is all hearsay, and some have argued that it's a bit of a storm in a teacup. However, we heard in the piece, the video footage this evening from the Irish Network Against Racism, that they're concerned about instances of racism within the industry. But we also heard from two taxi drivers there who laughed out loud when it was said to them that maybe this is just about availability, and their response was very obvious. I know it's only two taxi drivers, but I've heard that from a lot of other people as well. They feel that, you know what, this is not really about availability. This is about differentiating. I'm an Irish taxi driver.
And if it is about advertising your nationality, when did I'm Irish become I'm racist?
Well, I think that, that what that does, I'm Irish, choose me over somebody else that isn't Irish, it does a couple of things. First of all, I think it does in an industry that's competitive, in an industry that's tough, and in an industry that's under pressure. It pitches workers against each other, which is not good for anybody.
What we have,
but it also does, the other thing I would say as well,
just let Helen finish her point.
The other thing I would say is it pitches workers against each other. If that's the case, if it's about, and I've seen stuff in the past and had conversations about this, knowing who the nationality of taxi driver, it's not good for workers. The other thing it does is it makes consumers make a false choice. Being segregating almost kind of the population around, I have to choose between my taxi driver. It is inherently in that regard.
Don't consumers choose between Irish products all the time? Doesn't Dunnes Stores have the tagline, the difference is we're Irish?
But we're talking about workers here. We're talking about people. We're talking about employees. We're not talking about bread. We're not talking about a product on a shelf. We're talking about an actual, a service that's bought here in Ireland. Also at a time in a recession. Also at a time when, let's let's not forget, 17% of our population are born outside of Ireland. I work with migrant workers, men, women and children on a daily basis, low-paid workers in minimum wage jobs across Ireland who are feeling the recession like Irish-born people. And a situation like this, if people are growing up in a society where they're told, pick your driver and make sure it's Irish, that's not good for anybody. It actually also feeds fear, and we know fear feeds racism.
Isn't that the point, Dave, that if it is advertising nationality, immigrants are spending money in this country as well?
I'd like to just go back, Colette, to the point that Helen was making about the green light. The green light should have become an enforcement issue the first day that they appeared on the roof sign. And that's where you go back to the problems within the industry, is the lack of enforcement of the regulations.
But why are your drivers putting them on their roofs if they're illegal?
I have already explained, and it is a tiny minority of drivers that have the green light in place.
But they are illegal, and we've known now for the last 2 weeks through the Minister in all his interviews. They have to be taken down. You're not allowed customised.
Some drivers don't know the regulations as well as probably you or me.
Come on, Dave.
No, I'm seriously. Some drivers don't know the regulations as much as
you don't know the regulations of the industry that you're signed up to. That you're not allowed to customise the taxi plate.
The basic fact is, some drivers didn't realise that they could not make an adjustment to the taxi roof sign. When we heard this controversy break, and the organisation that I'm involved in, TTnH, sent out a text message to all of our members, encouraging them, if they had this thing, to remove it, that you were in breach of the regulations. But you saw from our film there
that they're still around the town.
Oh, they are. And the guy who still has them on his roof sign will face a fine if he's eventually caught by the lack of enforcement.
But on that, I think it would have been very useful if somebody or a body or an association within the taxi industry came out about this months ago. We know that seemingly this has been going on for a year and a half, not going on, but in terms of it's been used as a sign. So now, but we're in the situation we're in now, and unfortunately this rumour has got legs.
Helen, what you're asking us to do now is enforce the regulations in our industry. We've many a battle to fight in the taxi industry. Now you're asking the representative bodies to actually police the industry as well.
As opposed to the taxi regulator.
Exactly, Colette. The taxi regulator is there to enforce. Now, the issue that we have is that there's 9 enforcement officers to police in the industry. In Dublin, there's 10,500 taxis. So they're incapable of doing their job.
But Dave, if they're breaking the law, they're breaking the law.
They're not breaking the law. What they're doing is breaking a regulation. And if the regulator or if the enforcement officers were out on the street doing their job properly, the driver would have been fined from the beginning of this.
OK, I want to get back to the issue of the green lights. Is there a danger, Helen, that we're being a little bit too PC here, and that people are entitled to drum up a business in a very tight recession?
I think we need to be very careful here. This is not a PC issue. This is what we're talking about here cannot be taken in isolation of the fact that we know there's been an effort made up and down the country for taxi drivers to differentiate themselves from immigrant taxis. There was a lot that was in. There was a lot that was in the. Sorry, can I just finish this? There was a lot in the videotape tonight that was very positive, and I want to say this.
The organisation that I represent has taxi drivers from all nationalities. If there is racism happening in the taxi industry, our organisation condemns it totally.
Would you accept that there is a problem with public transport with racism, Dave?
I will give you where I have seen probably the best or the most racist issues happening. It was from an issue that Kathleen Doyle raised 2 years ago when she was regulator of the industry, when she encouraged the public to take whatever taxi they wanted from the taxi stand. Therefore, given the public the right to...
Could I come in here, please? Sorry, could I come in here, please?
All right, Helen.
We're not saying that the taxi drivers are racist, and we're not. I think we have to be very careful about not stereotyping taxi drivers. It's a very diverse, it's also a very tough industry. You asked me the question: is it okay to differentiate yourself as Irish and drum up business on the basis of being Irish in a recession? And I think there's a lot of problems with that. And the reason I would say that is because we are in a diverse country. You heard some of the men tonight talking about the people on the ranks, some of the taxi drivers. That's part of Ireland now. And if we go down the route of I have to pick a driver on the basis of nationality and go for an Irish driver over an immigrant driver, it feeds fear, and fear feeds racism, and we're in a recession country, also a country in which a lot of young people, mothers, fathers from an immigrant background have made Ireland their home. And it will only lead to more racism.
Nobody in the industry would stand over any racism within our industry.
But unfortunately this has got legs now, David, and unfortunately a lot of people are saying that this green light is about being Irish, and unfortunately a lot of people in the industry are also saying that, and we can't ignore that.
There is a simple place that you should have went to about the green green light issue, you should have went to the National Transport Authority, and they should have dealt with the issue rather than Minister Varadkar coming onto the radio and branding taxi drivers racist.
All right, Dave, do you accept, just before we go, because we're cut for time, that although some people might look at a green light and say, right, I'm going to get into that because I think it means the driver is Irish, that there will also be other people looking at it and saying, I'm going to use that as an indication of a taxi not to get into?
Of course, because within a country there's a lot more people that aren't racist than are racist, so you could be actually discriminating against yourself.
All right, OK, Dave Mc Guinness, Helen Lowrey, thanks very much for coming into Midweek.